Sight reading is hard. It's especially hard for musicians who don't have a whole lot of experience reading music yet. But what if I told you you already have all the knowledge and experience and skills that you'll ever need in order to sight read? In this video, I'm going to teach you how to sight read faster and easier. No matter your skill level, what instrument you play, or what clef that you read, the ideas in this video will apply to you. Sight reading is simply taking music we've never seen or heard before and playing it in real time as we read the notes. In order to sight read, we need to do three things. One, we need to recognize the notes on the page. Two, we need to know where those notes go on our instrument. And three, we have to be able to play the notes in real time, ideally without stopping. I know this sounds daunting at first, but we're going to go through each of these steps individually, so don't worry. When you read notes on a page, your brain is actually doing exactly the same thing it does when you read a book. It's interpreting symbols on a page that otherwise would have no meaning and turning them into words and sounds that we can all understand. But maybe you're thinking, so what? It's called sight reading for a reason. I already knew that, duh. But what you might not have thought of is that because of this relationship between music and language, we can actually learn how to sight read exactly the same way we would learn words in a new language. The most important part about quick and easy sight reading, in my opinion, is quick and easy recognition of the music notes, or in other words, just fluency in the language of music. I'm going to give you a quick test. I'm going to show a chord on the screen. It's going to be in treble clef, and I want you to tell me what the chord is. Ready? Go. Did you get that the chord was F major? Now I'm going to give you the exact same test, but instead of a chord, I'm going to show you a word on the screen, and I want you to tell me what the word is. Ready? Go. Did you get that the word was pencil? Notice how quickly you were able to figure out the meaning of the word. Your brain saw these 6 symbols, P, E, N, C, I, L, and automatically formed together the word pencil. Not only that, you were able to associate the word pencil with the object pencil, in other words, figuring out the meaning of the word. Now, I want to ask you, were you consciously thinking about each individual letter, P, E, N, C, I, L, when you read the word? I'd be willing to bet that you didn't. You've just seen the word pencil written out so many times in your life that your brain automatically grouped them together and formed the word pencil. This is what's known as chunking, and it's an extremely important skill to have when it comes to sight reading. Your brain did all of this instantaneously because you were fluent in the English language, assuming you have enough of an understanding of English to understand this video. The way you became fluent in your native language wasn't by studying it in a classroom with textbooks, it was by being immersed in your language from the moment you could hear sounds. As a baby, you were hearing people speak the language all the time, day in and day out, until you felt confident enough to start reproducing it with your first words. So, in order to become fluent in the language of music, we need to immerse ourselves in the language, which in practice means practicing getting better at sight reading every single day. Now, I know that sounds challenging, but I'm not telling you that you have to spend your entire day or anything studying sight reading, just maybe 5 to 10 minutes a day along with your regular practicing. But just understand that the more work, the more effort you put into getting better at sight reading, the quicker and easier it's going to become for you to actually sight read, the quicker you're going to get better at this. I have a couple exercises that I like to run through with my students. I call them treble clef recognition exercise, or T-cray, and bass clef recognition exercise, or B-cray. I know it's very crazy. Okay, we're just going to run through some of these T-crays and B-crays for you guys right now. So how this exercise works is you open up any random piece of sheet music you happen to have lying around your house or something, and you try and identify any random note as quickly as you possibly can. It's actually better if you don't know any of the music beforehand, because what you're going to be doing is you're going to be relying entirely on your reading ability. You don't want to have any frame of reference. You don't want to have the music memorized at all. You just want to be learning how to read the notes and nothing else. So I'm going to show you some notes on the screen, and you're going to have about 2 seconds to get the notes, and I'm just going to show the answer right afterwards. Don't worry if you don't get some of these. This is all just for the sake of practice, but you want to be training to get these quicker and quicker as you progress. Okay, are you ready? Let's go. This one is E flat. This one is A. This one is D. This one is C sharp. This one is F. This one is B flat. This one is D sharp. Okay, you get the idea. So there's actually a more advanced way to go about this, and that is instead of just reading notes, we're going to be reading chords. If you happen to play an instrument that doesn't read chords, you can go ahead and skip this section and go straight to part 2. But if you're a pianist like me, you should stick around since I know you're going to find value out of this. Okay, so the idea is just exactly the same as before, but instead of notes, we're going to be reading chords, and I'm going to be showing you chords that are only in root position just as to not cause any confusion, and we're not going to go any augmented or diminished, just we're going to stick with major and minor chords in root position. And so I don't want you to try and think of these notes as individual notes. Try and say F major instead of F A C, or G minor instead of G B flat D. You get the idea. So we're going to go through these individually. Ready? Okay, go. This one is C sharp major. Not an easy one to start with, I know. I'm sorry about that. Okay, next one. This one is E minor. This one is F minor. This one is B flat major. This one is G minor. This one is A flat major. So you get the idea here, and just try and do this as much as possible when you're working through your own music. Okay, moving on. This part utilizes exactly the same skill as the skill you use to type words on a keyboard. There is literally no difference between these two skills. Let me explain why. When you type words on a keyboard, you're not constantly looking down to make sure that the words that you're typing are the right ones. Your brain is so accustomed to the keyboard layout that all you need to do is think of the word that you want to type, and your finger's muscle memory does the rest for you automatically. Likewise, when you sight read, you have to constantly be looking at the music in order to figure out the notes that are coming next, so you actually don't have time to be looking at your hands while you're playing. So in order to play the notes that you're reading, you need to rely on your finger's muscle memory that gets built up over time with your knowledge and experience with your instrument. Specifically, think about what your hands have to do, and if you happen to be a wind or a brass player, think about what your mouth has to do in order to hit certain notes. I happen to be a pianist, so I'll be demonstrating some examples with the piano, but just know that you can do any of these ideas with any instrument. For example, in order for me to reach the interval of a sixth, my hand needs to be about this long. In order for me to reach the interval of an octave, my hand needs to be about this long. In order for me to play a root position chord, my hand needs to be the interval of a fifth and then fill in the note in the middle. The one thing you want to avoid when practicing this is to avoid looking at your hands as much as possible. This is bad because if you're constantly trying to look down at your hands while you're sight reading, what you're doing is you're constantly changing your input of information from figuring out the notes on the page, to checking and making sure that you got your chords right, to up, to down, to up, to down, back and forth and back and forth. And what your brain is going to do is it's going to get overloaded with the constant influx of information. That's why if you can make your hand movements on your instrument automatic by learning muscle memory, it's going to be so much easier for you to sight read. Don't worry if you end up making a bunch of mistakes at first. This is just all part of the learning process. Practice is going to make perfect. You're not going to get better at this overnight. It's going to take some time to get used to it. But trust me when I say this will make all the difference when you're actually starting to sight read. If you're a pianist, I highly recommend reading church hymns because the rhythm isn't very hard and the harmony is pretty basic, so the main thing you're practicing is just moving your hand from chord to chord. It's a great way to practice and internalize different chord shapes. To many people, this can be the scariest part of sight reading, since in order to perform something that we're sight reading, we can't just go back in the middle. We have to try and push through the music as much as possible, which adds this extra layer of difficulty to what we're doing. But in reality, all this part really requires is just extensive knowledge and practice of the first two parts. Here's why. When you play notes and tempo to a beat, you actually have a little amount of time to react to the next note. Right after you play a note, you have how long that note is in order to figure out and play the next one. If you can instantly recognize the notes on the page, for example, you give yourself more reaction time to move your hands in order to play the next note. And if your muscle memory of your instrument is strong enough, you can move more easily to where your hands need to be. Likewise, if your reading speed is slow, you give yourself less time to react to the next note. And if your muscle memory isn't great, you have to constantly look at your hands while you're reading notes, which further reduces your reaction time. If you're confident enough in your reading abilities, one tip that will really help you here is to look ahead in the music a couple beats. Now, even if it's just a small amount of time, this makes a huge difference because it's giving you even more reaction time to move your hands to where they need to be for the next part of the music. Okay, what's the point? Why learn sight reading at all? What's the point of any of this? If you made it this far in the video and you're still not convinced that all of this work is actually going to be worth it and you're going to be a better musician, I have a couple of points I'd like to make that might change your mind. First of all, let's start with the obvious. If you're sight reading all your music instead of memorizing all your music, you're going to have access to so much more music than anything that you can hold in your brain. Sight reading also increases the speed at which you learn music. If your note fluency is really high and your muscle memory with your instrument is really good, these are actually really important and valuable skills that will enable you to learn music so much more quicker than if you didn't have them. Sight reading also sharpens up your ear because if you're looking at the notes and never looking at your hands, the only way you're going to be able to tell if you made a wrong note is if you see the notes on the page and they don't correlate with what you're hearing. If you're constantly listening to yourself, you'll be able to go, oh, that's a wrong note or that's a right note, and your ear is just naturally going to get better as you practice sight reading more and more. The last thing that sight reading does that actually isn't really mentioned a whole lot is it actually builds your confidence at your instrument. Professional musicians make mistakes all the time, but one of the things that distinguishes them from more amateur musicians is their ability to push through their mistakes. If they make a mistake, they're not going to go, oh my God, I made a mistake. Their mentality is, oh, I just made a mistake. Let me make a note of it. I'm not going to make that mistake again going forward. And I have confidence, I have self-assurance in my abilities, my skills as a musician. And that's actually a really valuable thing to have. That's it. That's the whole tutorial. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.